And the music is not playing. Can you hear the music?
No.
No.
Is the toggle live?
Yes, it is.
This thing is hit or miss sometimes.
Oh, wait.
You might be able to hear it, but we can't.
I can't hear it. Go time. Come on. Why you gotta mess with me? This is what happens when I get overexcited about an episode. It's deciding not to play live. So
You want to have the refresh, maybe? Reload your browser and come back in or something?
To Riverside?
No? Yeah.
Well, we're fully live to YouTube. We're living our best YouTube lives right now. I'm just not I'm just not playing the intro. Okay, let's just pretend we had a jolly good time dancing to the intro, and it's coming to a conclusion.
Played it enough times. Could you just like maybe hum it for us?
do. Well, please, I think we should leave. Go time. Okay. Hello and welcome to Go Time. Today we are going to be talking about GopherCon, but about kind of where did GopherCon come from? How is it put together every year? We'll be hearing about some of the logistics, the difficulties, the challenges, but also some of the fun stuff about putting a conference of this scale together. We're very, very lucky and excited to have our wonderful guest, Erik St, who is a GopherCon organizer, as well as being co-author of Go in Action. Welcome, Erik. Lovely to have you.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, I'm actually happy to be on. It's I miss hanging out with all of you on air.
I'm so excited. This is, I think, the first time I've hung out with you on air, so I'm excited. Oh, and then Johnny, who is my wonderful co-host, is like, oh, fine, I'll leave you two to it. I don't want to interrupt this beautiful moment. And he's back. Awesome. Great. Welcome back, Johnny. I was a little bit upset. I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sharing this beautiful moment with you as well, Johnny.
Johnny's like, oh, it's Erik. I'm out of here.
Yeah, I'm out of here.
Well, welcome. I'm excited. I haven't co-hosted a show with you in a while. How are you doing?
It's been a while. I'm doing great. And I'm actually looking forward to this episode as well, because I'm one of the GopherCon OGs, as you say. Yeah, I was at the very first one, and I think I've been at most of them, maybe for one, but we'll pretend that's not true.
Well, lovely to have you both as a co-host on the show, but also as a co-chair of this conference, as well as being on the organizing committee. So we're going to start right at the very basics for all our lovely newbie Gophers. What is GopherCon, and how did it first become a thing?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like we've talked about this before on, I think, Go Time and Changelog as well. But yeah, it came around as a really interesting story at the time. Brian Kettleson and I worked together at a company. This is, I don't know, 2011 or so, and we were both using Go, and we were attending lots of conferences. And so early 2013. We kept talking about the fact that I really wish there was a Go conference. Like really want to go to a conference and meet other people who develop Go. We both live in Tampa, really big in the tech industry for healthcare, which is not, a bleeding edge technology adopter. So it was basically just Brian and I covering all of Tampa at that time with Go, right? It was still very, very early. And so mid 2013 rolls around, like April, May or so, and some folks in Denver from the Denver Go meetup group were talking about, like, I really wish there was a Go conference. And Brian and I are like, I know, this is what we've been saying. And so it was basically like, oh, why don't you guys do it? And we're like, well, how hard could it be? We should totally do it. It turns out after the fact really hard. There's actually a lot that goes into it that we knew it would be a ton of work. We totally underestimated just how much work it would take. But yeah, so that's sort of how things came about. It was really interesting because we were hoping to just get 100, 200 people together. At the time, we didn't know how many Gophers there were. The language was still super new. And so we planned, to hopefully get like 200 or 300 people together. And then it just sort of exploded from there. We had to keep calling the venue back to get more room. And we maxed out at 750 people the first year. So that was really crazy for us, because I mean, anybody in the conference circuit kind of knows, like, I mean, most conferences take years to even hit those numbers. So we were just really, really in shock. It was really a humbling experience though too, like the number of sponsors who came on, like, and same thing, they just wanted a conference for this technology too. And so many of them weren't even worried about ROI at the time. They're just like, the ROI is a Go conference starting, right? We need to hire people. We need these events to exist. And so that was really awesome. Then like all of these people that like we really admired in the Go community were there, like helping us like stuff bags and swag bags. It turns out stuffing 750 swag bags takes a long time. Who knew? So yeah, it was just really interesting, to have like, I'm trying to even remember, like Steve Francia, Bill Kennedy, Damian Grisky, like Dave Cheney, like there were so many, and like I'm gonna leave people out here, which, I always hate doing those things, but trying to remember all of the people who were like back there would sit here forever. But it was just kind of crazy, all of these people who were like, no, you should be giving talks. Why are you helping us stuff bags? But yeah, I think everybody was just really excited to just see this thing happen, and anything they could do to make it an event that would be remembered, they were willing to do. And the same is true about emceeing, right? So at the time, Brian and I are running around just putting out fires, because there's so much stuff that happens behind the scenes that people don't even know, and like things that you need to manage while you're on site. And so we'd be like putting out a fire and then running up on stage to like introduce the next speaker. And Kelsey Hightower came over and was like, looks like you guys kind of are a little busy here. Do you want me to take over introducing the speakers for you so that you guys can handle everything? And he did. And that's just like another example of, people in the community just trying to pitch in to make it something. And I think that all of that probably sparked the atmosphere that exists there today, right? Where we care more about the community than anything else, and everybody just sort of contributing to it being a great time.
So how has it evolved? Like the image I'm getting in my brain of you kind of scrapping this together, wonderful Gophers helping in any way they can, to like the very put together huge conference that it is today. Would love to hear, like, what are the big evolutions? What are the big changes that you've seen?
So Eric, before you answer that, right, the as an attendee to the first one, right, like I can tell you what my experience was. So the I'm sitting probably like in the first or second row, and basically I was there with my friend Mark Bates, who's also a prominent member of the community, and we're sitting like in the first or second row, with all basically this ballroom filled with pretty much 750 people. This was a single track conference, right, at the time, like a massive number of people. Like, can you imagine as a speaker, right, for a brand, effectively a new technology, right? Go had been around for a while, but it hadn't really hit its stride, right? But you're about to give a talk to a room full of 750 people, right? So I can imagine, right, like what the first speakers, right, felt, right? But as an audience member, it was the whole thing was so smooth, right? With Erik and running around and Brian running around. Like I didn't know there was so many fires, behind the scenes being put out, right? But it was, for me, it was just basically things. The schedule went according to plan. The speakers were all on point. All the talks were great. To me, this was just a well organized conference. Now, how do you beat that, Erik? How do you beat that?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. there's always like the magic that happens behind the scenes, right? And so you're right. Like it was a very, very early technology then, right? So April 2014 is when the very first GopherCon was held. And so like we're talking pre-Docker, pre-Kubernetes, like all of these big technologies, um, most of the HashiCorp products like hadn't been released yet, right? Speaking of which, actually, Mitchell Hashimoto bought the first 2 tickets to the very first GopherCon.
Nice.
That's kind of a funny story there. But yeah, so like all of these big technologies that we look at that are written in Go, like most of these hadn't really taken off yet or had even been released. So it was still very, very early. But like as an example of like things that happen behind the scenes that people are unaware of, right? So we talked about the Kelsey thing. So I had this idea the first year. It was like, okay, well, most people will stay for the second, or they'll stay for the talks, and many people will leave like the next day. And flights all over the world will be taking off at various times. Let's book the space for the next day too, and people can just hang out and hack on stuff, right? Like this is the thing we all know now as Community Day, right? That day it was just called Hack Day, and the whole idea was just hang out, hack on stuff together before leaving for your flight the next day, right? People would just, and so we get down there in the morning, and the escalator just keeps coming, more people, and there's like one of those like oh crap moments. Like so many people had chosen to stay for the next day, like just as part of the conference. And you look at each other and you're like, we cannot set, like we're gonna have to feed these people, right? Like how? And so like we're just running back with the catering crew, like what do we have that's for like events in the next couple of days that you can like reorder that we can, yeah. And so like there's things like that that happen, and some of them are amusing after the fact, some of them are stressful. But yeah, I think that with the first year there was a lot that wasn't thought about as far as the viability of it as like, for lack of a better term, business, right? Because though it's not like a for-profit company or whatever, bills have to be paid, right? And so like you can't just sort of go in and be like, oh yeah, like, and one of the big things we did was we dramatically underestimated just how expensive running events are. And the best way I can compare this for people is anybody who's ever gotten like married and you see how like you're like how much per person for a plate of food. It's the same thing for events, and sometimes worse, right? Where Wi-Fi for 3 days is $40,000 or something, right? Like it's just the price tags on these things are just astronomical. And so there was a lot of evolution that had to go in there with budgets and how are these things going to be paid, and how do we account for the prices of these things going up over time. How do we account for things like attrition? Most people don't realize this, but when you book these hotels to account for everybody staying there, you're committing to a number of hotel rooms being sold. And like if people don't book those hotel rooms, you get hit with a giant bill, right? And so most people don't realize that. And sometimes you're going to be wrong and you will get hit with a bill. And so you have to kind of account for having budget for these things. There's a lot that goes into just trying to figure out how many rooms are you going to need, which nights of the week, because if you guess too high, you get hit with an attrition bill. If you guess too low, your attendees don't have a place to stay. And so there's like a lot of this sort of complexities there. So there's that side of things, thinking about those. But then the two other ways I'd say that things kind of evolved was, one, the vision of like a high production value, right? Like the idea for me, I always love the idea of people feeling like they've made it, right? Like people who speak to thousands of people, you want them to kind of feel like really excited about stepping up on stage, like I got here, And so like the idea of that was really fascinating for me. Like I really wanted to make sure that happened, and just a means of the production quality for videos coming out for people to have that type of stuff. The other was I took off a month of work before that event for all of the stuff that had to just be done. And there was so much work that was being done like at night after work and things like that. And so realizing that long term, there was no way that we could manage that, not while having day jobs, right? And so this is where, like many of you who have been in the GopherCon circle, this is where like Heather Sullivan and Convention Designs comes in. So the first year we had worked with them as a local contact. They were referred to us by the hotel, our planner at the hotel, for the ancillary events. So we wanted to do kind of like an offset party and like a dinner for the speakers and things like that. And so that's how we first came in contact with their company. And so going into 2015, that's where things kind of, that relationship started to build even more. And they came in and helped with a lot more of the logistics side of things, negotiating hotel contracts and things like that, managing travel and working with the convention center and all of that stuff, figuring out what we needed for insurance and paramedics and all of these things you don't really think about. And so since then, like every year, sort of that relationship has built more and more, where they've taken on more and more of the some of the back end logistics side of things, so that we're able to focus on more of the content and the bigger picture. And there's still a lot that I do behind the scenes too, but like all of that is like off my plate. Like going through event banquet orders and hotel contracts with a fine-tooth comb, not exactly exciting for me. So I'm really, really glad to have that relationship where, Heather and I are very yin and yang when it comes to a lot of these things, like complement each other. So yeah, so that was probably a big one too. So because this really, an event, once you get to this size, it's a year-round effort. And so, and I have a full-time job. There is no way that I'd be able to work on all of this stuff full-time. So I'm really grateful for that relationship. And most of you have met her over the years, and her amazing team that helps us with so many aspects of the conference.
Indeed.
So we've heard a little bit about kind of the logistics, putting together an event, but of course GopherCon would be nothing without its participants and its amazing speakers. So would love to hear a little bit about, like, how do we get these amazing, wonderful people on stage? I know, Johnny, you have been a speaker, you've been part of the kind of talk review committee, and now as a chair. I'd love to hear a little bit about, like, what is that process? What is that process for the speaker as well as kind of the committee and getting to that final lineup?
Mm-hmm. So there's two sides to this, right? And having been a speaker and now being part of basically the people who get to decide who the speakers are going to be, these are very different things. So I'll tell you from a speaker standpoint, even submitting a talk, right, is a terrifying process. Like going through, you despite all the advice, that you read as a potential speaker, and you watch YouTube videos on how to go about it, even the GopherCon committee puts out, blog posts on this is what we're looking for and things like that. It's still a terrifying process, and this is something that we definitely have to acknowledge. And you always have basically this self-doubt that sort of travels with you all the way from the time you hit submit, for that proposal, all the way to the point where you deliver the talk and you're walking off stage and you're still thinking, did I do a good job? Right. So it's a very scary proposition for a lot of people. And basically this is me giving a shout out to you. If you've ever submitted a proposal to GopherCon, even if you didn't get accepted, kudos to you, because we know it can be a very stressful process. And for those who have been accepted and have given talks over the years, basically big shout out to you as well, because we know the preparation process, rehearsing over and over again and making sure, you cross your T's, you dotted your I's, you go in on stage, whether you're doing a big sort of a, general audience talk, which is very scary, or you're doing a tutorial in a smaller room. We know it's a very challenging, right? Unless you do it, even when you've done it a few times, it's still scary. It's still, sort of inducing of sort of that flight or fright kind of sort of emotion.
And let's be clear here too, like the tutorial sessions and stuff like that are more about being able to go more in depth, right? Having more
Right.
time, it's much more specific, so you can drill in. But like those rooms aren't small either. Like
Right.
pre-pandemic, you're talking 450, 500 people plus in that's not a small talk.
That's the size of another conference.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's all, but the thing is, we have the sort of this process. So moving on now to the sort of selection process, it's always a combination of what is something that basically the value threshold, right, is always high for us. Basically, is somebody going to do this talk justice? Sometimes we get proposals for talks that the topic itself is an interesting one, but there might not be enough meat on the bone, so to speak, right? Based on sort of, could be based on the proposer's sort of a comfort level with the talk, which sometimes comes through in the description and how they propose things. It could be that the material is interesting, but there's not enough interest for it, where there's a lot of things that goes into sort of the selection of the talks and the topics that we focus on. Like, for example, we've heard so many talks on gRPC that this year in our selection process, we were like, yeah, we have a couple more, gRPC submissions, but there's nothing in there that's sort of really new. There's not going to be new ground covered, right? So we might sort of basically deprioritize those in order to give, other people and a chance to introduce something new, right? So it's always about what is the value that we want the community to derive out of this conference when they walk away from it, right? And we want that to be as high as possible, right? So that's definitely sort of to put it all the machinations that goes on behind the scenes, right? Between the coordination, just getting all of us in the same room at the same time, like scheduling wise, just to get the chairs together to pick the darn talks is challenging, right?
Oh yeah,
So
there was 5-6 meetings. This was after the shortlist was created.
After the
right?
shortlist, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so to Johnny's point too, like to everybody who's ever submitted a talk, like it is, and we know emotionally, like there's a hit there, right? Like when your talk doesn't get accepted. But like in a normal year, we're going to talk pre-pandemic, because everything's after where it is is a mess. But pre-pandemic, we would get 300 plus submissions, right, for 25 slots. Like those are hard numbers. A lot of great talks aren't going to be accepted. And additionally, the process is intentionally set up so that none of us, can favor certain talk types and stuff like that. So there's a whole committee of people who review these things blindly. So we don't know who you are or your expertise and things like that when they're reviewed. And so two things come of that, right? Like, so we rotate out the committee. And so that fresh perspectives, where it's not like a bunch of us who have been here 10 years being like, do we really want an intro to Go talk, right? Like that wouldn't be fair, right? And so as we're swapping that out, that means the perspectives kind of change and we get a consensus across the group what topics are interesting and not. But I think the key thing here that Johnny pointed out is that because of the way this blind process works, we don't know anything about you. And so if you're super vague about the talk that you're giving, why are you the person to give that perspective, right? And so if we can't look at your outline and abstract and kind of be like, oh, this person really knows what they're talking about, they know what the takeaway should be, we don't know if you're a good public speaker. We don't know how well you know the topic. If you're like, I'm going to talk about the compiler, what specifically about the compiler? Like, how are you going to take, that's complex. How are you going to fit that into a 25-minute talk, right? And so you have to give enough detail that somebody who doesn't know who you are is able to look at that proposal and be like, this person's clearly thought about how long it's going to take to deliver this information, that there's a clear path to delivering it. They know what their takeaways are going to be, things like that. And topics that have been covered in the past aren't necessarily bad if you also are talking about like how you're building off of the talks that have been given in the past, or how your perspectives on that technology have changed over time, and things like that, where there's some new information and it's not effectively the same talk being given by a new person every year. And sometimes there is room for some of those topics that are just going to be regular topics that every new generation of Gopher coming to the conference there's going to need to see or hear, right? But then there's some of the technologies that are, I don't want to call them fads. They're trends, right? Like where this year WebAssembly is just really hot and there's lots of proposals about WebAssembly or something, right? I don't want to call it a fad, because a fad makes it sound like it dies off, but people get really excited about one technology in this like 1 or 2 year period. And so there's usually like an influx of talks about that topic.
This year's GopherCon is all blockchain talks, folks. I'm kidding. I am so kidding.
It's Web3.
It's Web3. No. We won't do that to you.
So just so there's absolute clarity, the process is that we have this group of enthusiastic Gophers, ideally at different levels, different experiences, that come together to form a kind of paper review committee. Is it that the chairs reach out to these people? If there are wonderful kind of Go Time listeners who are like, oh, like I'd love to volunteer, I'd love to be part of this process, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, so there's obviously the GopherCon channel that's inside Slack. Like myself, Heather, we all hang out there. So I don't always get to read all of the scroll back, but if you ping myself or Heather Sullivan, who's in there, or Johnny or Angelica or anybody else who works with us in the CFP committee and things like that, we can definitely do that. Obviously, there's a limited number of slots there. Often we'll reach out to people who, especially like newer speakers and things like that. We'll do that because ideally you want people who kind of, there's two needs there, right? So one is fresh perspectives on like what topics are important and exciting to the community, and you want to make sure you kind of have your finger on the overall pulse of that. It's easy for us to kind of get in our own little world and be excited about things like Web3, you know, and NFTs. But the other is that you also want people who understand what is a good talk, right? Like, and so sometimes with these, if there's enough information there, we will reach back out to people who have submitted talks too, right? Where we're like, okay, I think I have the gist of what they meant, and this could be a really engaging talk. Let's follow up with them and get them to give us just a little more detail, or to clarify some things. You know, it's really hard to do at scale, right? Like giving everybody feedback. But if you're like on the 10-yard line and we're like, I think this is a talk that could be super, especially if you've got a topic that's not done very often, that's really needed. I'll pick on a topic area that I'm super passionate about, which is like security, right? There's not a lot of talks about security, but definitely needed. So like if you submitted a talk in that category that was like so close, you know, we might actually reach out and be like, yeah, could you clarify a couple of these things and stuff like that. I mean, I think I kind of went off the beaten path here from the original topic we were talking about.
The beauty of Go Time.
I can add some flavor to that too. So one, reaching out to us if you're interested in, you know, sort of helping out at any level here. So you don't have to you don't have to be a speaker at the conference to actually help out, right, the conference, right? So you can be a part of the review committee. And again, we're always looking for fresh perspective on to help us sort of get our short list, get the talks that we should be paying close attention to. So you can always reach out to us and say, hey, I wanna take part in the next time you do this, and we'll definitely reach out. And sometimes we reach out to people because we notice you, right? So one of the things that people out there may not realize is that as active members of the community, we ourselves are always keeping an eye out for new blood, for fresh blood, right? So at some point, Erik's going to retire from this. At some point, I will retire from this, right? And so will Brian. So will all the people that you're familiar with, or you might have heard, you see, names popping up over and over again. These people will go away at some point, and we need to sort of be grooming, so to speak, the next generation, right? Who's going to take over GopherCon after Erik is done? Who's going to be passionate enough, right, to be able to step in his shoes and carry this forward, right? Because I'd hate to see GopherCon go away just because Erik decides to take a break, right? So
what are you trying to say here, John? Are you kicking me out?
Hey, you gotta.
These are the 5 reasons that I feel that I'm qualified.
Right.
Mutiny. I knew this was a setup.
Oh man,
this is actually your exit interview.
This is your exit interview. Oh man, but yeah, it's the we keep an eye out for people that are active members of the community, right? And we notice when somebody is for lack of a better term, a nice member, a nice person to interact with and sort of talk to, right, within
I think
that Johnny cut out.
Yeah.
I think the moral of the story was that we've got our eyes out. If you're doing good work, if you're interested, if you're active, that doesn't go unnoticed. A big part of the work of the chairs and the work of those who are organizing GopherCon is to be in the Slack channels, to be going to the smaller meetups, to be keeping an eye out for interesting topics, people, and then engaging them. And I'll take advantage of the fact that Johnny is frozen and therefore can't hear this. Also, these are people who you can reach out to if you're even dabbling at the idea of submitting to GopherCon. So kind of personal story, when I was going into the Go community and I was like, oh my gosh, GopherCon, this is so big, this is so cool. I aspire one day to speak at this amazing conference, and was talking to Johnny, and he was like, Angelica, just do it. Just put a proposal together and submit. If you don't get accepted, try again. And these people are so giving with their time, are so willing to help. There is also a more formalized program around mentorship and helping coach the speakers to be ready for stage. So even if you may have apprehension around am I going to be okay at speaking? Am I going to be all right? There are programs around helping you get on stage and be set up to succeed. Johnny was the reason why I ended up speaking at GopherCon, and is a huge part of that kind of mentorship programming. And serendipitously, Johnny seems to now be back. So I'm going to pick on you, Johnny, to talk a little bit about, you missed my whole spiel about how you were just a really bad mentor to me, and you never encouraged me to do anything. So this is your chance to defend your
redeem
reputation.
Myself.
Yeah.
The beatings will commence until morale improves. But I think also we talked about how we got here, and it's interesting that when this conference was started, we always believed that people who knew how to run tech events would come build the big Go conference. Our intent was a thing, but I think that whole caring about people in the community first is the huge thing that probably made GopherCon what it is. Because from conference 1, there were many of us, from organizing crew to other speakers and stuff like that were in one of the hotel suites until all hours of the night while some of the speakers did dry runs of their talks and things like that. And over the years, it's become a much more formal thing But like that's always been prevalent. And I know we're talking a lot about like how do I get involved on the content side of things. So volunteering, if you've got a lot of public speaking experience and you want to mentor other people who are new to public speaking, like that's a great way. But also like you can carve your own path. There's so much at the conference that have come from other people coming to us, right? Like Andy Walker came to us one year with the idea of like, how do we teach people how to have a good experience here, how to make the best out of a conference and things like that. And so that's when the whole Gopher Guides program was started. And you know, he's ran with that, and it's been amazing, especially considering so many attendees are first time attendees. Some of them have never been to another conference before. And so all it really takes is just being passionate about the community and bettering the experience for other people. And if you've got ideas, you know, please come to us, because that's what matters more than anything to us.
Awesome. We've talked a little bit about kind of how to get involved, the speakers. Moral of the story being, if you have even an inkling of a thought, of a dream that you would like to be involved in or talk at GopherCon, just do it. But I want to hear a little bit about this year, because obviously we're coming off the back of the pandemic, a period of virtual hybrid conferences. This is going to be kind of the first in-person GopherCon in a hot second. I myself am extremely excited, given that I did my like virtual keynote, did the like next year was like reviewing papers. Now I'm like co-chairing, and this is going to be my first in-person GopherCon ever.
Wow.
So I am extremely excited, and I will be a first-time in-person GopherCon attendee.
That is amazing. I hadn't realized that.
Yeah, me either.
Get ready. I'm going to whip out the Gopher onesie if I can find one on Amazon. I'm ready.
Nice.
But tell us a little bit about GopherCon. I know we had a bit of change. I want to hear about like Chicago. I'm certainly very excited about Chicago. Never been. The only thing I've been told is try the deep dish pizza. But Eric, can you?
Bread though, like
I don't know. I love bread.
This isn't my unpopular opinion, but really, why do we need that much bread?
Yeah.
That's a lot of carbs.
They're not gonna let me. They're gonna like put me back on the plane when I hit Chicago. What did you say about our pizza?
But tell us this year, what are you excited about? What should we be looking forward to?
I'm just excited to get people back together, and I know there's a lot to kind of work around and navigate right now, right? Because you know, pandemic is far from over, right? So I know there's a lot to navigate there, but you know, 2 years of sort of not being connected, it almost feels the way it did back in 2013 when this started, right? Where it's just so desperately want to get together in the same room with some other Gophers, right? And so yeah, that's what I'm most excited about is just to have people there, even though, you know, it's not going to be the same scale as it was pre-pandemic, you know, but there's also some opportunity to reminisce a little bit too, right? Like that tight knit group that came out of the first year and everything, forging new relationships. So yeah, I'm pretty excited. I'm excited about some of the topics for talks and things like that too. I could probably hit on a few of those, but then I'm like playing favorites here, which is like how much should I do that? You know?
I'm looking forward to seeing people again face to face. Honestly, I mean, the for me, going to a conference and perhaps, you know, I have other people out there who share the sentiment. But going to the conference, I honestly go less for the talks, and more for the sort of the interaction with people. Right, I get to see people face to face that perhaps I only know in avatar form on Twitter or something like that, right? I get to actually have conversations with people, go out with people, like, knock a few beers back with people, and just really get to know the people that I interact with that are part of this community, right? That I enjoy being a part of so much, right? And one of the things that I think really I don't want us to take for granted is that one of basically once I started sort of getting more involved in the community, and and this basically started taking hold after the first one for me. I because the community was so small at the time, um, I immediately saw the opportunity, right, based on the people that I had interacted with at the conference and then beyond. I immediately saw an opportunity in the form of basically like having been part of other communities before Go. I saw some ways that some things kind of got derailed, and I saw some ways any interactions would be sort of sour, for especially for beginners. There was sort of this elitism. My pronunciation's off. Sorry, that's a French speaker in me. There's that elite mentality that, oh, RTFM, and or don't ask quote unquote stupid questions, like that whole sort of really something I'm hoping technologists as a whole we're getting out of, although there's still quite a bit of that out there. But that whole sort of commonality, right, between other communities that I saw, I didn't see or sense any of that. Even though I was new to the community and new to the language, I didn't see or sense any of that, right? Negativity, right? When I early on, so I'm like, okay, maybe this is an opportunity, right, to keep it that way, right, or to make it better and kind of keep it moving in that direction, right? And I think really, like, once the people that are really involved, the people now, right, that has been longtime Gophers, I think there was this implicit sort of a decision on the part of all of us that says, hey, you know what, let us all collectively, right, make this community what we'd like it to actually be, right, in the future. How would actually let's try to keep it a community that is welcoming and not and nice to beginners, friendly to beginners, people that are still learning. Because whether we like it or not, there are more new Go developers, right, currently than there are old hats like myself or Eric or folks on the committee. There's a way more new people, right, and that has been the case for the last, I'd say, 5+ years, right. Every year, more and more new people come into the community, and we want that first interaction, right, to be a positive one. We want you to come for the technology, but stay for the people, right? Because the people are really what's going to make the whole experience much better for you, whether it be a colleague or a coworker or open source contributor that you happen to be working on something with. Whatever that interaction is, we want it to be positive. And the code of conduct stuff that we have, for the conference itself, the Go community code of conduct stuff in general, the interaction, the rules that sometimes not everybody likes, for the Slack channel, Gophers Slack, right? We know that these things can sometimes, right, be annoying in certain contexts, right? But overall, they are positive instruments, right, for making sure that both the conference spaces that we're in, whether it be GopherCon in the US or GopherCon Brazil or GopherCon UK or any other Go conference that basically GopherCon has inspired, we want all those spaces to be safe spaces for everybody, welcoming spaces for everybody, great learning environments for those who are brand new to the language and brand new to the community, and all hats as well, right? So the whole, I think it's something that's very important to us as community leaders, right? And I think that's something that whether Eric wanted it to be or not, that is what we've become, and I hope you do like where we're going, Eric, as far as conferences go.
Yeah, I mean, I like the community aspect. Prior to the pandemic, I had dreams about another conference I wanted to start too, for similar reasons, right? Like conferences, that are very community focused versus, ones that very much are sales machines, right? And they are what they are, and that's not like a hit on them. I'm passionate about being in the communities where it's just that a bunch of people that are just trying to support each other and help lift each other up. And so, yeah, so I like where we're going, but it's interesting, like you said about like the number of new people. I mean, all of the OG Gophers, so to speak, if most of them walked into new Go conference, the only people who are probably going to recognize them are other OG Go fans, right?
Right, exactly.
Like we've hit that point of sort of like critical mass, and that like most of the people that we all looked up to and admired and have since gone on to do other things, people wouldn't even recognize their name, right?
Right.
And
Yep.
that's not necessary. It's not good or bad. It's just the evolution of a technology. Once you hit a point of like critical mass where it explodes, most people don't care about those details anymore, right? Like the number of people, as sad as it sounds, who cares about who the original people who wrote the Go programming language is it's mostly OG people. Like most of the people
Right.
don't care because they don't need to know that to get
Right.
stuff done. They just want a language that works and does what they need it to do, and it does that, right, in spades. So yeah.
So I want to kind of press on the community aspect a little bit harder, not to be a skeptic, but there are many communities that say they're very inclusive, they say they're very diverse, they say they're very welcome to all, but in practice they turn out not to be. So I'd love a little bit to hear about the actual, in practice, how do you do that? How do you foster an inclusive, welcoming community? What are almost some like tips, some things that you can do, some things that you are cognizant about? I would also like to press that like one step further and directly ask you, Erik. I know that the move to Chicago was rooted in serving our community, the Go community. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that, because I think that is a example of where these concepts of like, we care about our community actually go into practice.
Yeah, so that's a hard one, right? Like, because I don't claim to be an expert here, right? And we're all doing, I can't say all, but like most of us are doing our best to do what's right for other people and to advocate for them and things like that. And we're gonna screw up, right? Like it happens. We're human and we're gonna make mistakes. I think the big thing there is to be accountable and be able to admit fault and figure out those things. So I think, a lot of it comes through example, right? Like if you're people other people look up to and they want to mimic your behavior. And if you're a jerk, then they're a jerk too. And if, these things are important. I think the other part is about, we like to talk about being an ally, but I think for most people, it's very fair weather, right? Like it's easy to be an ally when it requires words, right? Like it's much harder to do those things when there's real sacrifice needed, or you're exposing yourself to a ton of risk, right? And so, the move to Chicago, like that's one of those scenarios, right? Like I don't know what will come of that, right? Like there's a lot of complexities in all of that, a lot of which I can't get into, currently, but those things come secondary to doing what's right, and I think that when we look at the tech community and things like that, and even just people who mean a lot to me, right? Like that are very close to me, like that are impacted by all of these changes, looking at Florida, it just doesn't align with our values, right? Like we put up a code of conduct and we talk about how we all need to be welcoming and accepting and all of these things. And then it's like, well, let's hold our event in this state that just keeps passing. And I should clarify, the state I live in, right? Like I have to live here. Moving out of state, speaking of like hard things to do, right? A lot of complexities there, but Yeah, I mean, passing these laws that are very, very harmful to people in our community. And so, some people may argue that, what does that really do, right? Like, big Ron DeSantis isn't going to be like, oh, GopherCon's leaving, we should reevaluate these laws. But it may not matter to them, but it matters to us.
Right.
All of us who are part of the community, and it's more of us. It's slightly different use of the phrase, but the law of 2 feet, right? Like we're speaking with our feet, like we remove ourselves from the things, the situations that we don't want to be in, and move towards places. And so I think Chicago aligns a lot more with our values.
Do you think we'll swing back over to San Diego at some point? That was my favorite spot, by the way. When we headed there.
Yeah, so one of the things, like when we talk about like complexities and logistics and stuff, what a lot of people don't realize is like the number of years in advance. Like I think we were contracted up to like 2025, like going into the pandemic. And so like there's a lot of complications and all of that. So yeah, San Diego is definitely on the list. We love San Diego too. And I should also clarify too, when we talk about sort of like acceptance and things like that too, is and people doing their best, is there's a lot, and we don't have a lot of time here, but to go into like the risks associated with running conferences and things like that. It's important to remember that while we made this decision, people's situations are completely different. And we have to understand there's a lot that goes into these things, and the contracts, and how long people are contracted out, and things like that, it's not an easy decision to make. And with any regard to conferences and these types of things. So we have to have a critical eye on speaking with our feet and not attending conferences that are just, putting known people with sexual harassment issues and things like that on stage and stuff like that. Like we have to be very careful about, like, we don't want to support conferences like that. But on the flip side, we have to understand that some of these things come with real consequences. You're signed out several years later, you've got minimum commitments and things like that, and great, you decide to go somewhere else, and then you get sued for everything, right? And so like we have to kind of give people a little space and support too when they don't do these things, and try to understand that, are these the type of people who would do something like, I don't know. Like I said, these things are complicated, and I don't claim to be an expert. And we made the decision because like this conference was founded on the idea of the community being the most important thing. And so whatever comes from all of this, it's worth it to me to do the right thing. But also, like, I recognize that like that's very, very hard, and these things take a long time, right? So even if somebody wants to do something, you don't just like make this decision on a whim, right? Like you have people reviewing contracts and lawyers and all of this stuff. They're not quick decisions. Even if you were already doing it, like you can't make an announcement till you've like found a new home, right? And so there's a lot of these things where sometimes giving people the time to sort this stuff out, like, don't get me wrong, like publicly asking people like, hey, like what are you going to do about this? Like, we don't agree with this scenario. Like, absolutely call people on that stuff, let them know that stuff's important to you. But also you got to understand that like these things, if we have to sign a contract 5 years out, how long do you think it takes us to actually
unwind that?
Like, it's changing the wheels on a moving bus is is a difficult thing.
Well, regrettably, we are coming to near the end of our time. I feel like there are so many more questions I want answered, but I have one more question to ask, which is for anyone who's thinking about like, shouldn't I go to GopherCon this year? Why should they go?
Because it's awesome.
Okay.
Clearly.
No, I think
Duh.
I think, to Johnny's point, like the networking aspect of conferences is huge, right? And I know we have digital means of communication, but it's not quite the same. And the interesting thing that I always find about attending conferences, and GopherCon is a conference that, does this for me, but lots of conferences do as well, is like, I always come out super invigorated and just excited about something that I want to just dive into.
Mhm.
And so, and having those conversations. So yeah, I think absolutely, if you can, please attend. If you can't, that's awesome too. Like, we totally understand, like we're in the middle of some of the most challenging times for people, and everybody's situations are different. We recognize, there's still risk in the pandemic, and we do our best to mitigate that stuff as best as possible. Also kind of recognize that like budgets for companies to attend conferences and stuff like that, either through travel restrictions or just budget slashing in preparation for recessions and things like that, aren't there. So like, obviously, like if you're not in a position, we hope to see you in a future year, but we would love to get a bunch of people together this year, and yeah, just I know I'm super excited about just getting together in person with other Gophers.
Johnny?
I just can't wait to hang out with my friends again, and make new ones. I'm tired of the endless Zooms and the Hangouts, and it's the virtual thing. And I will acknowledge that for some, the virtual aspects of a conference is actually a good thing, right? It's allowed people to basically virtually attend these events who normally wouldn't be able to travel, either because it's not sponsored by their employer, or because it's just a little too much to especially if you're coming from abroad and things like that. So we do see the value of having sort of the virtual aspect of components for that, and hopefully we can keep doing sort of the hybrid thing where stream the talks as they happen, and obviously the recordings are always available, usually within a matter of 2, 3, 4 weeks after the conference itself. But we ideally we want to be able to support kind of both things for those who are able to make it on site, and sort of get that full immersive experience of actually physically hanging out with people. Hopefully we can support both, right? And I think that's sort of the best of both worlds kind of thing. But for me, really, it's the getting to hang out with people again, and I don't know, like I enjoy the physical human contact, right? That's huge for me, and I definitely sort of is what I'm looking forward to the most.
Awesome. Well, I'm very excited. I would very much encourage anyone. I would mimic what you both said. If you can't go this year, please look to GopherCon in the future as a conference that would welcome you, that is wonderful to attend. As I said, I'm very excited to see where my involvement in GopherCon goes, because I feel like my first keynote was like, anyone can be a Gopher. How GopherCon changed my life and taught me I was secretly technical. So
Nice.
I would say it can truly change your life. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart, from anyone who remotely knows me. Awesome. So now we are on to not the best part of this discussion, because I think the whole chat was great, but the part that I'm intrigued to hear, which is unpopular opinions. This is the moment at which we see whether the music actually works this time for me. And nope. Okay, whatever.
Nope.
Pretend that was a great little shenanigan.
On that one too.
That was a wonderful woo, unpopular opinions. Hey. Clearly I'm not a musician, unlike you, Erik.
I'm more of a collector than a player these
Oh,
days.
okay.
I'm way too busy to
Yeah,
actually
actually
pick them
play
up
them.
off of the wall. And
We'll admire your background. Okay, so Erik, what is your unpopular opinion?
so is it that Brooklyn style pizza is way better than Chicago style, and also pineapple on pizza is good? Fight me. No. I think,
Catch me outside.
right. So yeah, let's use one for the industry. I actually obviously, as a manager and things like that, and doing interviews, and I've had discussions about people who have been interviewing for new jobs, and always that fun one, like, why should we hire you, sort of ordeal, like or why do you want to work here, right? Like, so I'm gonna go with my unpopular opinion is like I dislike those types of questions. Like it's kind of narcissistic in a manner. Like, why? So to be succinct in it, like, to make good money or to get a paycheck is a perfectly acceptable answer to why do you want to work here, right? That you don't need to have passion and all of it. So, and those things are great, right? Like for some of us who are invigorated by tech and we want most of our life to be that, that's awesome. But like, it's perfectly okay if you're just somebody who just wants a good paying job so that you can enjoy the rest of your life outside of work. And I think we need to do away with all of the crazy, like, you need to write an essay about why our company is the only company you've ever wanted to work for in your entire life and stroke our ego more. Like, it's just, yeah, it's gross.
Do you have a response to that, Johnny? I see you nodding your head.
No, I understand the spirit in which the question is asked, but like Eric says, I don't think I like the sort of connotation of it. Like, if somebody's asking that, they're really they why don't they just ask sort of the underlying thing, right? Which is why do you want to work here? What value, right? Is there going to be basically for us mutually to benefit from? What can we do for you? What can you do for us, kind of thing? Because this is all it is at the end of the day, right? Is it an exchange of my time for your dollars, right? Let's not pretend it's more than what it actually is. If I work somewhere and I happen to like the company, great, that's even better, right? But like, honestly, to tell the truth, maybe, and perhaps that is my unpopular opinion, I don't have a problem working for a company that is disliked. Like, if like, honestly, if the money is that good, right? I don't know, like, because at the end of the day, right, you may have a social justice agenda, right, or you may have some sort of agenda, and that's fine. It's good to have beliefs and have values and believe in things, but I have one too, which trumps yours. In my case, is feeding my family trumps all of your values. I don't care what they are, right? Like, for me, that is number one, right? And if that means working for a company that perhaps you happen to dislike, um, I don't have a problem with that. Like, you do, but I don't have a problem with that, right? And again, I know that's gonna be unpopular with some folks, but that you kind of have to give people space to to make the decisions that are right for them and their family, right? Not everything I do or say you'll agree with, not every decision I make you'll agree with, and that's okay too, right? Give each other some space and some grace.
The ability to walk away from your job because you disagree with something the company does is a position of extreme privilege that not
Hmm.
everybody has, right?
Hmm.
And more power to the people who are in a position to do so and are willing to take that risk, right? And it's the same thing with, like, the moving of a conference, right? Like, awesome for people who can do that, but it doesn't necessarily make somebody evil because they're not in a position to do so, or are uncomfortable with the risks, right? Like, some of us are much more risk averse than others and stuff like that. And there's nothing inherently wrong with making decisions that are good for your family, right?
Mhm.
It's the same thing when people quit a job, right? And they feel really terrible, like they owe the business their life. And it's like, you should never feel guilty for doing what's best for you and your family. especially if it doesn't harm other people. Like, why even judge somebody for that? If it harms nobody and it enriches that person's life, then it was a good choice, right?
Yeah. Moral of the story, your choices are yours. Other people's choices are their own.
Yes.
Let us all be accountable to our own choices because we don't know what's going on. And I would hope just listening to this conversation gives you an insight into the wonderful human beings that are behind GopherCon and how considerate and thoughtful they are about the world. It has been an absolute joy to talk to you both. I'm hoping that I can get you both on with me very, very soon again. And thank you for jumping on a Friday. I will hold you accountable to that, Eric. I know you're very, very, very busy, but now you've said it. You're coming back on GopherCon very soon.
As long as everybody's like, nobody's like, keep that man off the air. I'm happy to come back and discuss other things.
Well, as long
Even
as
if it's not
GoTime lets
GopherCon
me
related.
come, then I'll get you on too. And if not, we can just start another podcast. Don't tell Derek. Thank you both. I could babble to you all day, and it gives me such happiness just to see your faces, and I cannot wait to see them at GopherCon in real life.
Me too.
Yay.
Have a great rest of your Fridays and a great weekend. And now I'm going to play the outro that will not play probably.
Will not play for
Like.
Nope.
We didn't know we should have learned these on the guitar, Johnny. So
I know, right?
Right.
Just start playing them live.
Okay, so go time is over. Woo!
Wow,
And
watch Gerald will use those.
I hope he does. I hope he does.
Go time is over now.
I hope they remove the music from all other episodes and use that.
And adieu all. I'm going to go off of the live now.